Hello ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another Ace in a Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's video we'll be reviewing the Hawker Typhoon Mk Late Edition, whereby I've defined late to mean the versions after 1943. To give you a small historical overview on the plane and this iteration, the Hawker Typhoon was originally conceived to be the replacement for the already present RAF Hawker Hurricane. The Typhoon was to be a medium to high altitude fighter interceptor, with the plane's maiden flight being in February 1940. Two versions of the plane were introduced. At first, the Typhoon Mk sporting 12 7.7mm machine guns, although this plane was quickly outphased in favour of the Mk which sported 4 20mm Hispano Mark II cannons. The reason for this quick swap was due to the competitiveness of the armament in the face of armaments such as the 12.7mm Browning machine gun, as mounted on most American planes. During the course of its maiden flight and flights following that one, the Typhoon Mk was identified to have a huge number of problems, although these were not rectified by the time of mainstream introduction to the RAF in mid-1941. This rush was due to the fact that the Focke-Wulf 190A variants, as flown by the Luftwaffe over the English Channel, were causing all sorts of mayhem to the already present Spitfire Mark V series that the RAF fielded. The idea was the RAF would present the Typhoon in order to even the odds, yet the problems and reliability issues of the Typhoon really held back the chance that the RAF had. These problems were including, but not limited to, carbon monoxide seeping into the cockpit, the tail section coming loose at high speeds, especially in a dive, due to resonances and also weak structural joints in the tail section of the plane, and thirdly the fact that the original canopy design had a side door or two side doors, which meant that the pilot had an absolute nightmare of a time if they wanted to bow out of the plane. These problems were only rectified towards the latter half of 1942, with the later variants of the Typhoon sporting the bubble type canopy, and that's the version we're looking at here, the late version. Additionally, it's to be noted that the Typhoon Mk at the point of 1943 went from its intended role of medium to high altitude fighter to something a little bit less at lower altitude, a role known as the ground attack aircraft, with the Typhoon Mk being armed with 2 1,000-pounder bombs or 8 RP-3 rockets. Hence the Typhoon became very successful in a low altitude ground attack role due to its speed and overall stability at high speed, as noted by a number of RAF pilots. Ergo, the Typhoon does not go down in history as the ultimate plane that it was designed to be, but rather a long-range ground attack plane that fulfilled its purpose as it declined in terms of its abilities during the war. So, with our history out of the way, how does the plane perform in War Thunder? Well, as we've initially seen from our first two kills, those 4 20mm cannons really do rip things to pieces. As we descend down onto an enemy Typhoon, we give lead and open fire succinctly, taking off their left wing to achieve our third kill before breaking onto a Messerschmitt 109F4, achieving our fourth, and our quick little burst on that Spitfire Mark II was not enough to take them down, although we'll probably get the assist for it in a minute. It's worth noting that the playstyle that you just saw there in the Typhoon Mk is the one I use in pretty much any game I go into, and it will be a rinse and repeat style of play for the rest of this gameplay. We're on the airfield domination map Britain, and the setup I'm using is as follows: a 30-minute fuel load with 250m gun convergence and omnipurpose / universal ammunition in the cannons. Now the ultimate question instantly comes down to, why 250m gun convergence for a plane which, if you're going to boom and zoom, you want to open fire as early as possible, surely? The way I play the Typhoon Mk is as follows. I always go for the element of surprise. Some games I will spend the whole first opening 5 to 10 minutes, if the game goes on for long enough, literally flying about 5,000 meters altitude, especially if no enemy planes have come up to that height. Reason being, because I'm waiting for the opportune moment. And as you're going to see in this game, I constantly fly towards the enemy side of the airfield, and I look for a line of enemy planes I can pick out, because that way I can obtain the most number of kills for least risk and also for least effort, essentially. Of course I have to bring the gun onto target, but if they're all in a straight line, I don't have to try and manoeuvre, I don't have to waste all my energy, and therefore I can retain all that wonderful dive speed that the Typhoon picks up. It should be noted that the 1B late edition mounts a Napier-Sabre Mark IIc engine with 2260 brake horsepower. And time again you're going to see in this video just how much speed that engine provides, especially in a dive. Even on the level, we're doing well over 450 km an hour if we're allowed to keep flying level for long enough. And that's actually something that the Typhoon was noted for in its introduction. It was the first RAF plane to be able to do over 400 miles an hour in level flight, or 600 km an hour to you and me in standard metric. So, having considered the speed and the dive advantages, how does the plane manoeuvre exactly? With this Focke-Wulf 190A5 coming up and soon meeting their demise, as I force them to stall, it's worth noting that the Typhoon Mark 1B at high speed does incredibly well in terms of its turn circle, especially with a little bit of rudder. Although I'm going to be honest, using the rudder on the Mark 1B can actually really hamper your chances of getting onto someone's tail, especially in combination with the landing flaps. And as I brake onto this other Focke-Wulf 190A5, having got the assist on that enemy Typhoon I believe it was previously, I'm now on 6 kills and 2 assists, and I brake up for this 109F2. My burst going slightly wide, although doing significant damage to their tail. Unfortunately, the enemy 109F2 gets rammed by one of my teammates, so nobody gets a kill or an assist. But once again, I'm now running away, building back up my speed, getting myself to a safe position, and then going to recommence the attack via the standard fashion. Returning to my point on manoeuvrability, the problem with the rudder in combination, especially with the landing flaps, is the rudder on the Typhoon causes you to bleed a lot of speed and energy. And the landing flaps additionally, because you have no combat flaps essentially in this plane, or not to my knowledge, the landing flaps will cause you to bleed speed dramatically, which means for the first turn or two you will have a very tight turn circle. It won't be able to match up to the Spitfire or a Zero, but you'll be able to tuck in tightly with the Yaks, Focke-Wulf 190A series, and even some of the American turners, such as the P-51 Mustang. As soon as you've used up that energy via your first 2 turns, you are incredibly vulnerable. And time again, I've been caught out. I've been in a dogfight for too long with an opponent in a one-on-one, and in the end I've been caught off guard because I've just lost all my energy, I've dropped below 400 km an hour, and I can no longer keep in the fight. And as a result, Aerocobras, Focke-Wulf 190Fs even, have been able to just pull round behind me gradually and secure the kill. Because a low-speed Typhoon, in my opinion, is a dead Typhoon. But that's not exactly a negative philosophy to worry about, simply because you should be used to that if you've played the Mark 1A quite efficiently in order to get to the Mark 1B. The Mark 1A, as I reviewed a little while back, and you may see that review using the link in the top right corner of your screen as seen now, was a plane which I reckoned was a brilliant energy fighter for its rank. I expected the Mark 1B to be a brilliant killing machine due to the cannons, but not the best energy fighter for its rank, because you're going up against competition which is more of your contemporary, competition which will be able to outperform you. Messerschmitt 109 Gustav 2s, Focke-Wulf 190 A5s, Spitfire Mark 9s and P-51D Mustangs are all superior to you in a number of categories. Unfortunately I can't get the kill on that A1 there, but I proceed to aim at another enemy Typhoon and then break up onto this Aerocobra that's levelled out, thinking they're all safe and in the clear, to achieve kill number 7, before aiming directly for the pilot of this Heinkel 111H6 in order to achieve kill number 8. Again, as you can see, we're flying away with just over 600 km an hour speed, and so we've got nothing to worry about, because no opponent here, unless they're flying a jet, which is incredibly unlikely for the matchmaker of this plane, will be able to catch you out of such a dive, unless they've been tailing you all the way from 3,000 metres onwards in terms of altitude. And so really, going back to the comparison of the 1B with the 1A, one has to say that the 1B will live up to your expectations if you played the 1A. It will not go any further. It's not a brilliant plane in terms of what it can achieve. It's a deadly plane if you use it right. And I feel that my strategy of boom and zoom running along incredibly long and linear paths works very well. Of course, you're going to get opponents who will be aware of what you're doing, especially after the first 1 or 2 runs. And as you'll see gradually towards the end of this video, my opponents start to get a little bit more aware and start coming up towards me and start flying in a more tightly packed grouping, so that I can't exactly get a clean shot off at multiple targets. I have to pick one, run and gun. It's worth also noting that Illusion 4, the Russian medium bomber, is flying at incredibly high altitude, and if this had been a ground strike game, I would have perhaps pursued them. Instead, due to the fact it's an airfield domination, it's in its adolescence the game now, I felt there was no need to pursue the IL-4, although I just kept my eyes open in case they tried to come down behind me and use their front gunner to wound my plane. Another important thing to note in the Typhoon from my experience, especially the Mark 1B, is that your wings will come off incredibly easy if you get hit by 20mm cannon shells. While this is usually standard to every plane, I feel as though you've just got to get slightly hit, say 1 or 2 rounds out of a full burst, and your wings will come off, by comparison with some planes which are a little bit more durable. As a result, being stuck in the furball for too long can prove a detriment to your plane's vitality, even if you only get grazed by a small amount of gun or cannon fire. Now this Messerschmitt 109 coming up to, and I believe it's a Gustav 2 coming up to meet me, I decide to proceed to climb, because I know I can match them climb for climb in terms of rate, and I'll just force them into another stall. Pitching the nose up fully and using the rudder to come back round on them, because I know with their 20 or 30mm cannon, it loses velocity and drops quite rapidly. Forcing them into a stall, I've managed to get my 9th kill by coming down on them swiftly, and again, with all the speed I've gathered from that quick stall, we're going to descend into a final pass on the enemy targets. Focusing on the Heinkel 111, who's trying to capture. I managed to achieve a critical and set them on fire and break the elevator off to achieve my 10th and final kill, making this gameplay a double ace. Something which I was quite proud of because I had not achieved a score of this kind in the Typhoon prior to this matchup. So, are there any other notable weaknesses, you're probably asking, other than the fact that the Typhoon can't turn well at low speed? Well, the engine seems to catch fire quite easily if it's hit directly by gunners, and so going after bombers, well, I'd be a bit hesitant to. I usually try to pursue planes such as Wellingtons, IL-4s, and perhaps every so often a G4M1 in the early period of a game, because your engine performance seems to also drop off at about 5,000 metres or more. Minus that, I can think of only that and the other weakness for the Typhoon, which, as I've said before, is the turn circle and the manoeuvrability at lower speed. So with that game being over, let's take a look at some stats. So in review, that game, which included a double ace and 2 assists, allowed us to rack up 23,198 silver lines, a rather wonderful haul. Additionally, in terms of research points, we got 2,130, all going towards our Beaufighter Mark 21's research. Excuse me. It's also worth noting, ladies and gentlemen, that this is during the 1.3 times event for the Guinness World Records achievement made by Gaijin. Well done to them, of course. And so these statistics should be taken lightly, rather than on a more serious note. In review then, the Typhoon Mark 1B Late Edition is a plane which is very worthwhile in terms of grind, especially if you played the Typhoon Mark 1A and you're wanting just a little bit more in terms of the armament. While you are not the top of your tier anymore in terms of your manoeuvrability and climb rate and energy retention, you'll be able to trade blow for blow with your opponents, especially those who are predominantly energy fighters, such as Messerschmitt 109 G2s, Focke 190 A5s, and P51s. You won't be the best, but if you manage to get behind them with your superior energy and keep your speed above 400 km an hour, then your Typhoon can really kick up a storm with those 4 20mm Hispanos. Especially seeing as we managed to achieve first place in that long airfield domination gameplay. Not by a huge margin, but by a nice clean sweep over the airfield. And so I've been TX1for1, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies!